We're going to get started now for this Rural Development Forum and have an interaction with the folks that provide the absolute majority of funding for National Rural Water and help us in our rural communities. So these are our friends. And we're going to start with the Acting Undersecretary. And by the way, they have a rural development staff here that in the front, so all your questions can be answered. The Acting Undersecretary is a gentleman named Doug O'Brien. He was appointed Acting Undersecretary of Rural Development. Prior to that, he worked in several positions for the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Vilsack. Before joining the Department of Agriculture, Mr. O'Brien served as the Assistant Director of the Ohio Department of Agriculture. He also served Senior Advisor to the Iowa Governor, Interim Co-Director for the National Agricultural Law Center in Fayette, Arkansas, and Senior Staff Attorney for the Drake Agricultural Law Center in Des Moines, Iowa. He also served on the Senate Ag Committee and Legislative Assistant for Member Boswell. He's Clerk for Justice of the Supreme Court. He's got a vast rural experience. He's visited many of your states, West Virginia and others. He's a good friend of ours, and I want you all to give a warm welcome to the Acting Undersecretary, Doug O'Brien.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. I absolutely want to thank President Anderton and Sam, Charles, for the invitation. I want to give a shout out to the folks from Iowa. I just said hello to Greg Huff a little bit ago. I'm from a farm in Iowa, and I know what it means for folks in rural places to have dependable infrastructure, in particular water and waste infrastructure. And kind of on that note, I want to thank the team from USDA that's here. Scott Behringer is right here. We got Kent Evans, who's in the house. He was back here working. And some other folks that we have at the forum this morning. They do a fantastic job. And in particular, this team from USDA in the last few years, with some budget cuts and some staffing cuts, these folks have really stepped up and been able to partner with you to continue to make a difference for folks in rural places. I certainly want to send greetings from Secretary Vilsack, as well as Jasper Schneider, who is our state director from North Dakota and who just a few days ago stepped up to be the acting administrator for RUS, taking Jackie's spot. And I want to give a special thank you to Jackie Ponte-Lazaric, who most of you folks in here probably know. Jackie's just a fantastic leader for USDA, not only for the water programs, but really for all of rural development. And so I really want to thank Jackie for stepping in and doing that for us. And I want to recognize Bill Simpson and Fitz Elder, great allies in Washington, D.C. You've got folks who are very effective messengers for you. They certainly understand the issues. They know how to communicate, how to make sure, that folks like me, that we know the good things we're doing and the things that we need to change. And Bill's just a great guy to work with, as is Fitz, so we thank them. And then finally, I want to recognize, I'm not sure if he's in the room, but he's certainly in the building, John Padalino, who just 2 months ago departed from USDA as the Russ administrator. John and I got to work at USDA in a number of different capacities, and his intellect, his passion for rural places, his innovative approaches really made a difference to not only the water program, but really rural development and USDA in general. So I want to congratulate John for the award today, too, and congratulate all those who received an award. So I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of where water, infrastructure, how they fit into the rural economy and to the nation's economy. And I want to thank one other group of people, and that's all the folks that are sitting here, all those that are in the building, and all those that are back at home who keep the tap running, who make sure that there's a good place for that water to go when it leaves the house for the business. And the reason I want to thank him is because you are such important partners for our mission at USDA Rural Development. Our mission is to create economic opportunity and improve the quality of life for people in rural places. And we simply couldn't do it without the folks from the National Rural Water Association and all the state associations. In the last 5 years, we've been able to partner with you to make investments in rural communities to the tune of $11 billion. This year, we were able to do $1.5 billion. You have helped, and we've been able to partner you in helping 14 million Americans get access to clean water and wastewater systems. And we couldn't do it without you. So I want to thank you for your past commitment to rural places. And I want to talk about the future commitment that both of us have to rural places. Talk just a second about, why does rural matter? Now, I'm from a farm in Iowa. Most of the folks in here are probably from rural places. You've got kind of a bias to rural places. You care about your neighbors. That's certainly important. But well beyond that, rural matters because it's important for the nation's economy. There was a report a couple years ago from this international group called the Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development. This is a group of the industrialized nations, the Europeans, Japan, some folks in South America, and they work together on comparing economic policy best practices. They found that public and private investments in rural places are indeed very good investments because rural places, on average, grow faster than urban places. Doesn't necessarily surprise people in this room, but it surprises a lot of folks on the coast, or some of these folks that have sort of a fixation on big cities. The reason is there's so much potential in rural places. With a few very wise strategic investments, you can really open up economic potential in a rural place. You folks in here know that better than anything. A well-placed water system, in addition, that's going to the right place, that has that right set of specifications, and you can bring in that business. You can make sure that you can grow or renew that neighborhood. Another thing that report found was that investments in workforce development are almost always a good investment. You get a good return. And investments in infrastructure are a good return, especially and sometimes only, excuse me, if those investments are aligned with a strategy, an economic strategy in that local or regional economy. So we know that rural matters to the growth of the nation's economy. And we know that there's a lot of opportunities right now. Last week, some very good numbers on the nation's economy. I know we sometimes, it seems, these days in particular, anything that comes out of Washington, D.C. isn't necessarily good news. There was some very good news last week. 55 months straight of job creation in the United States. 10.2 million jobs created. It's the first time since 2008 that the unemployment rate went below 6%. And there's a lot of opportunities in rural places. We know that it's been some good years for production agriculture. Got some brothers, some cousins, some uncles back in Iowa. Been some good years. $140 billion worth of ag exports last year. In the last 5 years, we've set a record almost year after year on ag exports. There's opportunity around local and regional food systems. This is a movement where folks, and not only in the country, but in cities, are interested in spending a little bit more for their food if they can buy it from someone they know, if they know how it was grown. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing if small entrepreneurs in rural places have an income opportunity. In the last 6 years, farmers markets have gone up to over 8,000 from about 3,000 in 2008. Billions of dollars in that sector in growth. Another opportunity is in conservation and recreation. Just right here in the state of Washington, 63% of the people spend time outdoors and money. In fact, they spend over $22.5 billion. Yeah, I had to look down. $1 billion. And most of that is in rural places. It creates 230,000 jobs just in this state. That goes on in your states too. And there's people more and more thinking about their economic development strategies, using those assets that you have in that rural place to make the most of it for conservation and recreation. And then finally, the bioeconomy and energy efficiency. Big time opportunities there. Just a few weeks ago, Secretary Vilsack announced a loan in Nevada that's building a biorefinery, taking over 140,000 tons of municipal waste, basically taking that trash out of the dump, putting it into a biorefinery, and creating 11 million gallons of next generation biofuels, in creating a lot of value. That's in a rural place. So we know that rural matters. We know that there's great opportunities, but we also have to be honest and realize that there's some big time challenges in rural places. Rural population is declining. That's not news. Actually, it is news. Up until 3 years ago, the proportion of people who lived in rural places decreased year after year after year, probably since they kept keeping track in this country. But in 2012, it was the first year ever that the net number, the real number of people who lived in non-metropolitan rural places, went down. 44,000 people less. Same thing happened in 2012. We know that while job numbers and income have started to come back across the country, that in a lot of rural places, that's just not the case. Since about 2010, job numbers and income have stagnated in a lot of rural places. And the number that concerns me most is about poverty. And not only about poverty for the general population in rural places, but poverty for children. Fully 1/4, 1 out of every 4 kids who live in a rural place live in poverty. 1 out of 8 of those kids who live in rural places live in deep poverty. And by that it means they live in a household that has less than half of the income that qualifies you for a poverty income. That concerns me now because we care for our neighbors. And it concerns me for the future of rural. The most important asset for the future of rural America is not corn or hogs or natural gas or wind. The most important asset is our kids. Those are the folks that are going to be living and leading and creating a vision for rural America into the future. So we know we've got challenges. We know we've got great opportunities, and we know that it matters. This is important work, the work that you do to grow the economy in rural places. So then you got to ask, well, what have you done? Well, what we've done at USDA, I mentioned before, we partnered with you for $11 billion in water infrastructure. We partnered with others for about another $40 billion in infrastructure. We helped nearly 70,000 businesses with loans and grants. And we helped build over 1,000 community facilities, libraries, community health centers. And we helped over 1 million families put a roof over their head with direct and guaranteed loans. So I'm going to say at USDA we've done quite a bit. I'm also going to say we haven't done enough. We got to do things differently. And we've been doing things differently. We've been pushing the envelope at USDA by doing things like Secretary Vilsack taking the chair of the White House Rural Council, a first ever council created by President Obama that includes all those domestic agencies that do work in rural places with the goal of making sure that the federal government works together more effectively to get better outcomes in the rural place. We've done over 20 different initiatives in the White House Rural Council working with our brother and sister agencies across the federal government. We've also done something called Strike Force. It was formally rolled out in 2013. In 2010, it was piloted, and this was an effort by Secretary Vilsack to make sure that the resources we have at USDA are being used effectively by those people in places that need it most. So what we did basically is look at persistent poverty counties. These are counties that have a poverty rate of over 20% for the last 30 years. And Rural Development, Farm Service Agency, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and other USDA agencies work together to identify partners in those counties so that we can make sure that the people understood our programs and that they could access our programs. The result in that in the last few years has been over 500 partnerships, billions of dollars of investment in places that need it most. So we've done that. But we know we need to do more. So we are also doing things like implementing the Farm Bill that was passed this past February. First thing out of the box in implementing that Farm Bill was moving the dollars that you guys got in the Farm Bill, and we moved it out in 87 days? 74 days. I got to give Jackie and her team a little more credit, 87 days. So that was $150 million. And let me tell you, folks, Bill knows this, Fitz knows this, getting dollars in the Farm Bill for a rural development program is a really big deal. The Farm Bill includes dollars for the farm programs, for the nutrition programs, and for most of the conservation programs, but then kind of for everything else, it just authorizes. It doesn't give you money. And for nearly all of the rural development program, that continued to be the case in 2014, but for the water program, there are real dollars there. We're able to accelerate some major projects in your states that will make a huge difference for your future. There's a couple of other provisions in the Farm Bill that we're working on, and we need your help. One has to do with essentially Congress asking USDA how it can encourage more leverage. And it's a complicated provision, and Jackie's laid out a really good plan to make sure that we're able to get the input from really, I think, the most important folks who care about financing and know about financing rural water systems, and that's you. In fact, tomorrow you're going to have a chance to talk about that. And there's going to be a formal listening session a little bit later in the year. And further, there'll be opportunities to dialogue about how to enforce and how to implement that provision. Another provision provides the Secretary the discretion to provide set-asides or preferences for projects that are part of a community economic development plan. And that's another area where we want to work with you. We've done a lot of work, and basically what that means is for a very small slice of our money, trying to figure out how we can encourage folks like you and others who care about rural places and are doing the really hard work of working together to come up with a common strategy that basically reward them, we support them in that work. That one's got a lot of issues in it too. We're going to need to work with you to make sure that we get that one right, and we look forward to doing it. Another thing we're doing at USDA is on energy efficiency. I touched on this just briefly before, but the longer I look at this issue around energy efficiency, the more I think it is truly one of the most transformative things that we can do at this time in rural America. Now on the electric side, we rolled out a new loan program earlier this year called the Energy Efficiency Conservation Loan Program that basically rural electric cooperatives can borrow money from us, and then they can finance the improvements of the businesses, of municipalities, of residences, so they can lower their energy bills. And then the financing of that will be paid back through on-bill financing. Something it's happening, around the country in different places, but we really want to kind of institutionalize that. And the reason we want to institutionalize that is because this is one of the places where we can affect the bottom line of families in rural places. You guys know really well that energy and electric bills, depending on the time of the year, they can be some of the highest costs that families and businesses and rural water systems have. If we're able to help finance improvements so that those costs can go down for those businesses and families, the bottom line is going to improve. For you, it means that you won't have to charge those families and businesses in rural places quite as much. We're also, and Jackie can talk about this a little bit later, working on how we can support energy efficiency directly with the rural water system. So that's an area that I really urge folks to kind of work with us to take a hard look at to see if that's something you can do, and work with your colleagues in the rural electric cooperative too. So USDA has been trying to do things differently to make sure that we can help rural people capture these opportunities, meet these deep challenges, and at the end of the day, deliver for what the nation needs, and that's a healthy rural economy. Now, I'll finish by asking you to do some things different too. I think President Anderton did a fantastic speech. I enjoyed that speech about the power of association. One of the things that really rang true about that speech for me was that whether it was 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 decades ago, in lots of places that just plain didn't have a rural water system, there were a couple people that stepped out, that took chances, that risked their reputation sometimes in the neighborhood. And fast forward a couple decades, and almost all these rural places, they've got a rural water system that's dependable, and that everybody who turns that tap on every day, they just figured that's the way it always was. But it wasn't always that way, and it was because of people that made that difference. And I want to kind of take that point from President Anderton and think about the future. You know, the rural water systems, they provide such a fantastic service. The law and the way that the program has evolved over the years, I've come to really appreciate kind of the right set of balance between grant, between loan, between guaranteed loans, how we work with the communities, how we help price. It's a great program. But I think we have to challenge ourselves because of the opportunities in rural places, because of the challenges in rural places, that maybe we need to think differently about a few things sometimes. We got to think about some new partnerships. Think about working with people that maybe you didn't work with before. Think about the role of the rural water system in that community or in that region. And think if you can lead. Think about the folks who work for you. Think about the folks who are on your board. That public service that people do, that time away from their family, thank you for what you do. Are there folks around the community that maybe haven't had a chance to be a voice on their rural water system? Think about bringing some folks on in some new capacities. And finally, be a voice for rural America. And I'm not talking about just a voice for rural America at meetings like this, or if you're a member of the Farm Bureau or the Electric Cooperative, folks in the echo chamber who know and understand and value rural. But do it to folks who live in the city. Do it at the state legislature. Do it on the Hill for folks who don't understand rural that well. Write that op-ed. Go to the meeting of the Kiwanis in the bigger town or city in your region, and go tell them the opportunity that's in your community, and the great infrastructure that's in your community, and the great workforce that's in your community. Be a voice for rural America. So, with that, I want to stop. I want to thank National Rural Water Station for the opportunity to be here, but much more so, I want to thank you for the nearly 80 years of partnership on behalf of rural America, and I look forward to, and USDA looks forward to continuing to work with you. So thank you very much.
As y'all can hear, the Undersecretary knows a lot about rural America. He's been very gracious and open with us, very accessible, just excellent to work with. Now I turn to Jackie Ponte-Lazarus. that we affectionately, some of us, I should say me, affectionately refer to her as Ponty. And she was appointed the Assistant Administrator for Rural Development's Water and Environmental Programs in 2008. In that role, as y'all all know, she administers the loan and grant programs for the water and waste disposal accounts, and under her leadership, over $11 billion has been invested. She also, as you know, is over the technical assistance accounts, which funds our circuit rider programs. This program, year after year, is considered one of the best run federal programs in all of government. We all know that. I hope circuit riders help in that aspect. She also, from 2009 to 2010, she ran the Recovery Act for Rural Development, which almost killed her and her staff. She put out more than $20 billion in loans and grants. Prior to coming to Rural Utilities, she served as the Rural Development Assistant Administrator for the Telecom Program from 2006 to 2008. She has 25 years now of public service and is a graduate of James Madison University in beautiful rural Virginia. And you heard also that her and her staff did the record on the Farm Bill money. And on a personal note, having served, not in these folks' capacities, but in agriculture, that regardless of administrations, Democrat or Republican, and like you do in your work, you walk in and you survey the staff and the talent, and you pull those close to you that can do the job. And that's what's happened with Jackie. And then with that, when you have something that's critical like the Recovery Act, you pull them again and again and again. And why I bring this up, Jackie, is we want you to have a little rest here. And we got your back here, so. But she's been a real friend of rural water. She had some really great things to say, and I invite our friend and your friend, Rural America's friend, Jackie Ponty-Lazar.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you? If this were home, I'd be making you move up. You can ask my staff. Last week we had an all-hands meeting, and didn't I make you all move up to the front? Yes, I did. It's all right. So I'm very glad to be here and glad to be back in my role as the head of the water program. I did enjoy my time as acting administrator, learned a lot, got us through to the end of the year. We accomplished a lot this year, and it was my honor to do so, and I thank Doug for the opportunity. But I am truly happy. There's no one more happy than my return to the water program than my husband, James, who got a little nervous in the last weeks because I seemed to be enjoying it and digging in, and he kept counting off the days till I was done. So he's very happy. For those of you who've asked about my daughter, Abby, thank you. She's wonderful. She's 2 years, 3 months, going on 25 years old. And she pretty much runs our house and us. She's an excellent negotiator. Not sure where she got any of those skills from. She's pretty good with a mic and pretty good at working a room. So my poor husband, who is at home with her by choice right now, has his hands full. He's got kind of a mini-me running his life during the day, and then I come home and he very happily hands her over to me, where I train her more in how to be a mini-me. So it's all good. And I want to thank you, Bill. I am getting a little rest. It's nice. I don't know if you noticed, but we have a theme going in Washington where we're all sick. There's something great going around our school systems. And one of the great things they don't tell you about becoming a parent is that you're sick a lot. Which I guess I wouldn't have stopped me, but still. And so we're all suffering from this horrible virus. I'm at the end of mine, so don't worry. I can shake your hands now. But it was very nice to come here and get a little break and actually a quiet night's sleep, so thank you for that. I really want to spend my time with you today, and I'm kind of glad it's an intimate group because I have a favor to ask of you, and I want to be able to have a very frank discussion. So my favor is that after we're done talking today, that you take some of the facts that you hear and the messages you hear and take them back to your communities. As you're at the conference this week and talking to others, that you talk to them about what's happening. Heck, Sam, we might even tweet a few facts out, right? Okay, good. I never thought I'd see the day Sam Wade would be tweeting in the front row, but that's good. And I think part of the reason I wanted to have this opportunity to do this is there's so much misinformation, it seems to me, out there. One of the things I got to do in the 2 months I was acting administrator was travel a bit, and for all of the programs, and talk to all the different constituencies. And there's a lot of excitement about infrastructure right now in the country. There's a lot of uncertainty in Washington, and I think there's just a lot of anxiety. And I think that leaves the door open for misinformation to get in. Lord knows we get all kinds of, well, I don't know if anybody here is watching reality TV, but bad information, horrible stories, interesting versions of things on the news. And what I have found and how I was raised by my parents is you go by the facts. And so today I wanted to share with you kind of a retrospective, looking at where we were a year ago today, where the program is now, and some of the facts about the program that you can then take back with you to your communities with pride. So a year ago today, I wasn't standing here, right? Now, if I asked you how my speech was last year and you told me it was great, then I'd worry, right? But a year ago, we were in a shutdown. I was at home. Poor Doug was stuck working for no pay, right? Going in every day. John Padalina was going in every day. And your federal workforce was at home. We were forbidden from talking to anyone or working until the government was put back in business. Today, we are operating under a CR that was put into place well before the fiscal year, or close to before the fiscal year, but at least it wasn't a nail biter to the end. We're here, under the CR till mid-December. I'm an optimist, so I think we're going to have something in place that'll carry us through to the end of the year. So I'm feeling good about that, and you should too. A year ago today, the circuit rider contract was in question. There were concerns that we might have to shut it down because of the shutdown. We were able to avoid a lot of that. But this year, circuit rider program is up and running. There's money in place. There'll be money under the continuing resolution, which will continue to fund it. And all of that's good. That's very good. Because of that, our circuit riders last year were able to do 48,000 visits across the country and help 20,000 systems. And for that, I think you all deserve a round of applause. And like you always are, you were there helping in the aftermath of natural disasters. This year we had tornadoes, we had winter freezes, and we had the drought, of course. And in all of those cases, our circuit riders were there to help. You also were there to train, to push out new information, not only from our programs, but to help with things like Workshop in a Box and board training and a whole host of operator training. So we thank you for all of that. This time last year, we were under a hiring freeze. We hadn't been able to hire for some time, and in the water program, we were understaffed. Guess what? Last week, we made selections on 6 new employees for the national office in water, okay? Thank you to the Undersecretary's office for allowing the floodgates to open just a little bit. After good management of the funds and some good planning, there were funds sufficient enough to start some hiring, and you're going to see some hiring in the field as well. And you can thank yourselves for helping us on the budget side. That's right. So we very much appreciate that. And what we hope is that you will see, as good as we have been at providing customer service, an increase in that customer service. It's allowing us to build our program in a way that we know will serve you better. I did want to mention some new hires I've had since last year. Kent Evans, if you'll stand up. He's our director down in the Water Programs Division. South Carolina native, came to us by way of Kansas, which most people in South Carolina would never have guessed, right? You'd come through us, Kansas, on your way to D.C. Hiring Kent allowed my deputy, Scott Behringer, Scott, if you'll stand up, to stop playing 12 roles on the team, right? Scott's been with the program a long time, and he's got a lot of good things he'd like to put in place and move the program in a direction I think is the right way to go. In order to allow that to happen, we needed to have some new hires on the team. Kent was the first. Pam Bennett. Pam, if you'll stand. Pam is what we affectionately call our funds control manager at this point, and she moves around the funds, makes sure our state offices get their money when they need to obligate it, allocates those funds. And Pam also has taken over management of the day-to-day implementation of the Farm Bill for us. That's how we were able to move forward so quickly. I put together a two-person leadership team. Pam's handling the management side of it, Scott's handling the policy side of it, and it's working. It's working very successfully. We were able to move that money pretty quickly, and we're moving out some other projects as well. We are seeing some hiring in the field. Where's our Mississippi folks? Anywhere out here from Mississippi? Oh gosh, I'm gonna get Kirby later. They did finally get their engineer. And so we'll continue to encourage some hiring in the field for you. As you go through your year, if you're running into problems in your service area, let us know. We're happy to help. I can tell you we've taken a much more hands-on approach in assistance from the national office. And so, for example, in South Carolina, we had a program where they had a lot of losses due to retirement. We spent a lot of time training and a lot of hands-on assistance throughout the year, and they're the #1 loan maker in the country this year in South Carolina. So it can be done. So last year we had limited training dollars this time last year. Throughout 2014, we were blessed with enough funds to train over 3,000 employees and technical assistance providers. That's a good thing. So what that means is we've got staff who better understand underwriting, better understand servicing. Our technical assistance providers, our circuit riders, better understand our programs, are able to go out and implement the Workshop in a Box initiative. We did it in person, we did it by webinar, we tried some innovative approaches this year, all designed not only to get the training done, but hands-on, where we made students come to the class with a project in hand. So they had something to underwrite so that at the end of the year, if there were pooled funds, that they could then turn around and send that project in for funding. We're going to continue to use that approach. It seemed to work. So if you have a project and you're concerned maybe there's somebody new in your office, who knows? They might be coming to our training session and your project will be in there and we'll work it up real quick. And it could work out very well. As Doug mentioned, we do have a farm bill. This time last year, we didn't have a farm bill. We're well on our way to implementing it. Last year, we had limited dollars for IT investments in RUS. Throughout the year, we were blessed again with additional funds to make some commitments so that we can bring you new tools throughout the year. So under our former administrator, Pat Alino, he made a commitment to an intake system. What that means is you will eventually be able to do electronic filing of your applications. That's exciting to me. It's something USDA should be doing. Make it easier for you, faster for us, easier for us to analyze your data. That project is well underway, and we hope in the spring to launch that. And there's a role here for the National Rural Water Association. We're going to need your help in training communities on how to use the new system and getting them comfortable with it. What I can promise you is it will be easy to use, particularly the water module, and part of that's because Scott Behringer is leading that effort. He and a team have designed the CPAP, which is our internal processing system for the staff. And Jim Weir is sitting right next to him. Oh, there he is. Hi, Jim. Jim, you want to stand up? For those of you who don't know, Jim is here in Washington State in Wenatchee. But he works for us in the national office. He's brilliant, and he's part of a team under Scott where they are building all these great tools for our internal staff and for you. So the very easy to use screens, I've seen mock-ups of them. So over the winter and into the spring, we're going to be designing training, and we're going to want you to participate in it and get excited about it. We're excited about it. It should help with processing and move things along very well. We also have built what we call a construction tracker module. Again, may not be that exciting to you, but it's exciting to us. We launched it October 1st. What it means is for every action that gets taken under a project getting built out, we can track it in the system. When you ask for reimbursement for certain work that's been done, it gets keyed into the system, and there's a running record of that. And while initially it's for us internally, it'll make our processing faster, in the long run, it will enable us to build an outside module that'll let you file for reimbursement online. That is my vision. Online, you'll be able to go online, scan in your invoice, send it through the system, and in record time be able to get reimbursed for those funds. That's our hope, that we'll be able to bring that to you soon. And we just funded the build out of an electronic PER. We've been talking to you about this for a couple of years. We're really excited about it. Streamlined version of the PER. It'll have all the content that we agreed upon with the federal partners, but it should be easier to fill out. More check boxes and drop downs, less essays, less guessing what we're looking for, and more consistency. It's not just for us, it's for all the federal programs, and we hope that every state SRF will adopt it. We're going to encourage them to do it, and we know if we build it in partnership with them and we encourage them to use it, that they will. What that means for you is that you'll be able to, whether you're a system or a rural water association working with systems, you're going to be able to tell your system leadership, look, we can fill out this one PER and it can be used anywhere. Everyone will accept it. Saves you time, saves you money. Nothing's hidden. There's no mystery about what we're looking for. That's our goal, and we've set aside funds here at the end of the fiscal year to build that out in 2015, so we're excited about that. As the Undersecretary mentioned, this time last year we were starting to see a lot of this data about rural poverty. So during the year we targeted certain programs to address that, and we had a record year for what we call our search grants. Search grants are small grants for communities with very small populations under 2,500 and severely economically challenged. And this year we did 122 grants for $3.2 million. They're small grants, they're $30,000 grants, the maximum. Why this is important is that these are small communities who otherwise could not get a PER done. They could not do an environmental report. They don't have the funds up front to purchase those services. It means they will consider alternatives. Some of it may be building their own system, some of it may be connecting to one of your systems. And our hope, and what we'll be working on this year and next, is to bring every one of those search grants in for a full construction project. If it's warranted and it's feasible, then we're going to fund it, and that's what we're looking to do. As Doug said, you know, there's need out there, and so this is one way that we're helping to identify not only where the need is, but specifically what's needed, what's the best alternative, and how to move forward. Last year we were starting just to roll out our workshop in a box. I'm happy to say that we've had workshops all over the country. We'll have more workshops coming this year. We've trained over 250 technical assistance providers to go viral and do this kind of training all over the country. Are my folks from Kansas in the room? I saw her earlier. They were one of the first to kind of stand it up on their own 2 feet. They did a fantastic job. If you haven't done one in your state, please do. We're happy to help you with that. And in addition, to help with our sustainability initiative, we funded a $700,000 grant to National Rural Water to do energy efficiency assessments of systems in 7 states. This is kind of our first time out of the gate with this. We're really excited about it. And I think it will be successful. If it does what I think it will do, I'd like to expand this. It is a really important thing to figure out the best way to keep those costs down for sustainability. And one of the easiest ways is to go through this energy audit in a very systematic way. So we'll start with these 7 states, see what the results are, and move forward from that. You know, this time last year, Gifford, Illinois hadn't been hit by its tornado. And rural communities in California were not within days of not being able to provide water to their people. And our Emergency Community Water Assistance Grant Program was operating the same way it had been since its inception. During the year, we realized we needed to do something with our ACWAG program. And so we did. We streamlined it. And as a result of that, you know, when Gifford happened, you had folks on the ground and helping to get that system back online. Evan Jones and your Illinois Rural Water Deputy Director were there helping. And while they did get the system up and running, It wasn't a permanent solution. They needed funds to rebuild a water tower. Gifford, Illinois was our first applicant under the new streamlined approach. They were kind of our guinea pigs. They were very willing to do so, and we were able to turn that application around pretty quickly. They gave us some good feedback on what worked, what didn't work, and we adjusted our program as a result. And they were able to get the money for their water tower. We worked closely with their insurance provider, with FEMA. It all kind of worked and moved forward. Because of that, we were able to go full scale with our Emergency Community Water Assistance Grant Streamline program. And we had a record year, over $14 million. It's the biggest year we've ever had in ECWAG. And I couldn't understand why, with all the emergency we've seen over all these years, why we weren't seeing more. And what we realized is part of it was we weren't nimble enough. We're more nimble now. We're trying to be logical about it, and as a result, 25 communities in California were able to get funding very quickly, some in as short as a few days, right, Scott? A few days, because there was no construction involved. Some of them were just purchasing additional water, hoping to have enough water for their communities for the next few months. Well, I don't need to do an environmental for that. I don't need necessarily to do a PER for that. Why we would make people go through that whole process didn't make sense anymore. So we shifted, and we were able to do a lot more. So we look forward to helping where we can. We certainly hope we have a quiet, year in terms of emergencies, but we're ready. We're ready, and I think what it shows is when we need to, we can adapt and we can adjust. Not everything has changed, though, and I think if you talk to our staff and you talk to the folks when you come to Washington or even in the field, you're going to see that commitment to you and to the communities you serve is still strong. It's there. The passion's there. Everybody's a little tired, but we've got some new recruits coming in. The energy's picking back up. Everybody's really excited about it. And we're still a very well-run program. One of the things that I don't think people know is that we obligated more dollars this year than we did last year. $1.5 billion is $200 million more than we did last year. We obligated every bit except for 93 cents of our grant dollars in the regular program. And yes, we keep track down to the last penny. We know every last penny. And we've moved an awful lot of the loan money. Congress gave us an additional $400 million in loan this year. And we did take a bite out of that money. We didn't use it all. What's interesting about that is there was no budget authority associated with it. So there are no tax dollars that have to back up those dollars. We didn't like leaving those dollars on the table because we know there are other needs out there. And so that'll be our goal this year. That's Kent's challenge this year, to work with his staff and to work with all of you to make sure we know about those applications that can take loan on. And so we'll be talking to you throughout the year. We kept very close to our 70-30 loan grant split, despite all the challenges in the year. 67 loan, 33 grant. It's pretty darn good, even with an additional $150 million in grant from the Farm Bill. We maintained our 70-30. Our portfolio is very strong, continues to be strong. Nearly 17,000 loans, less than 0.5% delinquency rate. At our RUS all-hands meeting, we had a slide up on the screen that said, if rural development were a commercial bank, it would be one of the top 5 banks in the country. It would be number 5. And RUS would be, number 15, I think, or 13? We're a full-fledged bank, and with delinquencies rates like this, it's incredible. All of that is a testament to you, your commitment to the program, your commitment to the federal government and the services that we can provide, because we know that you'll pay the dollars back. It's a lot of loan money out there. We've worked this year to reduce delinquencies that were older delinquencies. We have some systems that have been challenged for more than a year. Some a lot longer than that. They just haven't figured out a way to work them out. We've been working through those. We reduced those delinquencies 20%. It's a small group, but we're chipping away at them. And we've got nearly 8,000 facilities financed. And each year we get in audits and we look at their financial ratios. We don't have all of the audits in the system, but of all of the systems we finance, more than 93% of them show financial sustainability. We know that number's higher, but this is the one that we can use as our statistic, and that's a good number, higher than we did last year. And we're getting more projects built. So we have something called an unliquidated obligation. It means when we obligate dollars for your project and you go out and you begin building, you build mostly with interim financing. Those dollars stay on the books as unliquidated until we disperse them to you. We set a goal this year for projects that were over 5 years old that we wanted to reduce obligations by about half, unliquidated obligations, right? Because what that means is those projects, people have been waiting for 5 years for that service to come to them. And we beat that goal with your help. We reduced unliquidated loan obligations over 5 years by nearly 60%, and unliquidated grants by over 50%. At the end, that means more service to more people and more communities, and that's what we're shooting for. We also kept moving on our Recovery Act projects. Are our Michigan folks in the room? There's at least one Michigan folks. Congratulations to Michigan. Michigan received the highest number of Recovery Act dollars in the water program, $250 million. Lots and lots of projects. You are now finished with every last one of your projects. That is an amazing accomplishment, well ahead of the deadline of 2015, so congratulations to Michigan. And this year we helped more rural residents than we did last year. 2.2 million people will benefit from the infrastructure investments we've made this year. It's 4 million more than, 400, what am I saying? Yeah, 400,000 more than last year. That's good. That's really good, because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. We're looking good for 2015. How many of you would know that our interest rates this time last year were actually higher than they are right now? When I went back to look last night, I just wanted to double check, and I thought, gosh, they were. Because this time last year, our market rate was 4 5/8. Our market rate is 4%. And our lowest rate, our poverty rate, was 2 3/4, and now it's at 2 3/8. It's a good time to use this program. Money is still inexpensive. It is still a good time if you've got needs and you want to invest to come work with rural development, work with our partners, and see if we can help you, while it's still affordable, move some of your projects forward. We're hopeful that funding will be at last year's level. It looks good that it will. And so that means we'll have money. We will have money under the CR. If you have a project ready to go, please let us know. Please let your state office know. We'll work with you. There are ways to make that happen under a CR. And most of all, the thing that hasn't changed is that rural communities need modern, affordable infrastructure. That hasn't changed in 80 years. It doesn't last forever, right? So we know the need exists, and we want to help, and we want to work with you to do that. And sometimes you get a little reminder. Every once in a while, the universe taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, this is why you're doing what you're doing. Did a lot of traveling over the last couple of months and arrived in Jacksonville, Florida for a conference. Arrived real late after working all day, speaking on a panel in the afternoon, arrived at like 10:30 at the hotel that night, and they didn't have my reservation. They had it for the next night, and they were happy to check me in tomorrow, which was great when you're tired and cranky. And they managed to get me a shuttle over the river to another hotel, in an interesting hotel, and put me in a hotel. I was not the happiest camper, and I was, cranky. And the woman at the front desk said, hey, I want to offer you a free breakfast. And I thought, all right, that's great. So I get up the next morning and I sit down to breakfast, and this is when there was some sort of intervention. I sit next to this lovely couple, Sue and Jim, and we get to talking, and they're not there. I was there for the Rural Electric Cooperative Regional. They're not there for that. They're there for the Quilters Convention, which I didn't know there was a Quilters Convention in town. That's probably why my hotel was full. And they were an amazing couple. They had retired from their previous careers. They had lived in California, in Indiana, made their way across the country over time, and ended up in Florida retired. And Sue designs fabric and has it made for her in Korea. and sent over, and then she sells it at these quilting shows. He runs he's like her roadie. He comes and sets everything up and helps her run the show for the day, and they sell, and they're a part of the global economy. But they live in a small town. And we got to talking, and I asked them if they knew about RUS, and oh, yes, they did. Yes, they were a member of the Rural Electric Co-op. Yes, they'd been members of rural water districts. Yes, they had rural broadband providers. And yes, they knew the need for our program. And it was such a poignant moment for me. It was somebody saying, you know what, even on your worst day, you need to remember that this program's needed. You need to remember that all the good work that's been done over 80 years is not for nothing. It's really important, and the need hasn't gone away. And so it was such a gift to me to have that moment that I thought, okay, I'm not going to worry about not having my room. I'm going to go give my speech today and feel good about it, and then I'm going to go back to Washington and do everything I can to help this program because it's needed. And so the one challenge I take to you is to take back the facts you've heard today. I've committed to Sam and Bill that we'll take these facts and we'll put them in a little briefer for you so you have them and you share them with people. That if you haven't considered rural development in a while for your financing needs, come talk to us. We're happy to talk to you. But at the end of the day, I hope that you're proud of the work we've done over the last 80 years. An entity like Rural Utility Service needs to exist. A program like the water program needs to exist because there's nobody else who's going to do what we do. There's nobody else who's going to be focused on rural, who's going to run like a bank, efficiently, effectively, watching your dollars, making sure everything's on track, and at the same time care about rural America to the point that we've done for the last 80 years. It's a wonderful thing. So I hope that you take that back. I hope that you talk to others this week about it. And I hope that when you come to Washington in February, you'll come by and see me. I'll be there, hopefully, in my office, unless Doug has any other plans for me, which I hope not. But you are always welcome there. I want to thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your sense of community. It's good to be home. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was excellent. And now we want to open it up to the room for any questions for the Undersecretary and Jackie and her staff. And we have a microphone over here and one over here. And just address any concerns you have or any questions you have for these folks.
Can we introduce the rest of the people? I forgot.
Come on.
I'm sorry, I forgot a few people who are sitting on the front row. I got way into it. It's like a religious experience up here. So Peter McMillan, who's our program director from Washington State, is here with us. I saw the Washington State folks circle him in their uniform jerseys today. Redskins are still going to win, but, whatever. Peter, if you would stand up. Peter does a great job for Washington State. Go Hawks. Steve Saunier, if you would stand. Steve is an important guy to you guys. He runs the circuit rider contract. And if you saw some of the emails he sends when things don't go quite right across the street, you'd be proud of him. He's a tough cookie, and we're happy to have him. And somewhere in this audience is Steve Trundle. Maybe. There he is, our Rural Development Program Director from Montana. Thanks for that. Is Clark here? I didn't even see Clark. Where are you, Clark? There's Clark. Hi, Clark, our Rural Development Program Director from Missouri. I must have missed you last night. I'm glad to see you.
I got one question. Jack, you had mentioned, and Doug, you had mentioned in the past, the government shutdown and the budget restraints, and in your presentation you talked about being able to train folks and hire new staff, and I can remember a couple years ago, Doug, you were having to deal with, reducing the workforce, hundreds and hundreds of folks, field structure, and now I see you're ramping up and doing smarter business. And just for the delivery of your programs, and even with, working with engineers and everything else, how do you foresee the delivery process going for these rural communities?
I'll do real general, and then I want you to talk about. I'd like Jackie to talk specifically about the water program, but I'll just mention briefly about kind of what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years at rural development. It's happened, and I should say, it's not only rural development. Most of the federal entities, and in fact a lot of the state entities that do community economic development work, have had significant cutbacks in the last few years. In 2012 and 13, we lost about 20% of our staff, many of them by voluntary retirement. None of them had to involuntarily go. That was Secretary's Vilsack main sort of direction when we're dealing with staffing and budget cuts back, is to do everything that we could to make sure that no one that worked for rural development needed to either leave involuntarily or not work for days or weeks, that is furlough involuntarily. And we were able to pull that off. The way we pulled it off, though, is we cut training and travel severely. Some of these folks, and I'm sure you know this, I mean, for a couple of years, in a lot of states, for a big part of the year, our staff was essentially grounded in their area offices because we literally had no money to put gas in the car. And it actually, this year, in waters being one of the big exceptions, but it's starting to catch up to us in a lot of our other programs. That is, our deal flow in a lot of the other programs is actually down this year, a couple of them fairly significantly. And we think that's mostly because we just weren't out there making sure that all the different types of stakeholders understood that we're still there, we've got the programs. But this year in FY14, that for us ends in September 30, we did have a significant increase. We were able to start hiring actions. We actually had over 520 hiring actions last year, but most of those, the majority, were internal because we were backfilling people. So now we're starting to get above water and start to move forward. Going forward, Bill, you know as well as I, and I don't think anybody does know exactly what's going to happen with appropriations. It's certainly my hope, and I think I'm fairly optimistic that we're at a spot in rural development where we're going to stabilize. I'm not, as one of my roles is to think on some long-term planning for rural development, and I have to say that I'm not planning for big growth. I'd love that. We could use the people. They'd make a bigger difference in rural places, but the fact of the matter is we're probably not planning for those big growth, but kind of stable, I hope, into the near future. So it did force some things at the department. Some of the technology adoption probably was accelerated because it really came into focus and what we needed to do to be more efficient. But the staff is under huge stress for a couple years, and including this year. And but still, in the water program in particular, they were able to deliver it. But I'll let Jackie.
Well, I don't have much more to add. We do have our new hires in-house. Some of them have come from the field because our best national office specialists often come from the field. So they'll be backfilling those positions soon. But as Doug said, we expect that there will be some backfilling in the field and some new additions there. But largely our focus is on training who is there and making sure they know our programs, know how to use them, and really know how to serve you. So again, we've heard from various folks throughout the year. I would recommend, if you're having trouble, of course, talk to your state director for rural development within your state, or you can talk to Sam and he'll get word to us and we'll see what we can do to assist in states. We know some states have been hit harder than others, and we've been targeting them for training and for outreach and to help them partner with others to get the word out to communities and to get those applications in.
Does anybody have any questions for this crew? Mr. Keegan.
Thank you. And I heard Jackie mentioned Michigan, compliment to Michigan, and it's very charitable of you. We know how people of Michigan are typically challenged. But
Didn't we tell you couldn't talk this year? You remember?
I didn't get it. But on the Michigan, I don't know if it was an initiative, but on the results of that, is there something we learned there new about implementing infrastructure programs that we should advocate or promote for other federal programs that are
Good
trying to
question.
get these the funding dollars programmed and allocated?
You know, I think that's a great question. And I think it's really the partnership that's on the ground there. I also think it's the key role that our state engineer in Michigan plays. We have really good teams. So you have people like Peter and Clark and Steve who are running the water program in the state for us, but they work hand in hand with our state engineers. And the state engineer in Michigan is outstanding and kind of gets that his role is also bringing applications in and making sure that projects get built out in a timely way. So it's a great suggestion. We'll go back, do some lessons learned. One of the things that our program directors have asked for this year is that they do a webinar for each other. They start sharing their lessons learned more. And I think that is a really good sign, because between Recovery Act and the 2 farm bills and everything else, people just haven't felt like they could catch their breath enough to have that dialogue. So I think we can have that this year.
My name is Mark Witchick with the Alaska Rural Water Association. At our in-service training, I believe it was Kent mentioned that circuit riders could assist communities by completing their environmental assessments. And I've been intrigued by that ever since, because I could see where that would really benefit our communities in Alaska. And I was just curious if you folks could set up some type of training for us folks to learn how to complete those, if that's something we could do.
Yeah, and we need to talk more about that. There are ways that the circuit riders can help assist in helping people understand what goes into the environmental assessment and completing components of that. In Alaska, you have a very unique situation because we have a whole separate, unique authorization in Alaska in addition to our regular program. And in that grant program, you've got 2 entities, the state of Alaska and the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, who do all of that work. But in the regular program, certainly we'd be open to talking more about what that role would be. And we're going to send Kent up to Alaska at some point this year. What do you think, January or? I've gone up almost every season. I went to South Dakota's January meeting. It wasn't too bad. I brought some sun with me, right? We had a good time.
Well, I got you, Jackie.
Yep.
This emergency community water grant program, she's got, that you hear a lot of complaints about government programs. You get the money out like in 4 or 5 days, correct?
We can.
You can. And the search grant, if you could just explain that a little more, because I think those are 2 valuable programs that we're providing the Farm Bill that people don't know a lot about. It's a great tool for communities.
Okay. So two farm bills ago, search grants came to be, and they are like our pre-planning and development grants. It can be used to develop a PER, a preliminary engineering report, an environmental report, any of those application components. And this program, the search program, is really special in that the only people eligible for it are small communities under 2,500 or less, and communities that are either below the poverty line or below 80% of the state non-median metro income. It's a 100% grant, up to $30,000. It's a fairly simple process. Not much paperwork goes into it. And our hope is that it will give those communities an opportunity to develop an application and really get some infrastructure in where they haven't been able to. What's been really helpful on the search program is the outreach we're getting through our technical assistance providers like all of you here. So we'll need to continue to do that as we go out into the field. And ECWAG, our emergency grants, there's still paperwork to do, but if they're in-kind replacements, we're not going to make you jump through all the same hoops that you would have to on a full-fledged new project. So it's much more streamlined. There's even kind of a check-the-box environmental report. It's pretty good. So try it out. If you find yourself in a horrible situation, we don't certainly want that to happen, but ask. One of the things we've also done at the request of our field staff is try to find a way to work so we don't have to wait until FEMA decides every last dollar they're going to provide a community. And we found a way to do that so that we're comfortable putting those dollars out without duplicating investments from the different federal agencies. And I think that's helpful. Any other questions? Oh, somebody's up.
I'd like to extend my apologies for this question.
Oh, Lord. I'm going to sit down now.
This is not going to be an easy question. The answer is not going to be easy,
All right,
right?
well, Doug can answer this one then.
I think I understood you to say that you're 93% sustainable. And the way I heard that was you got 7% of your outstanding loan holders, small communities, that are not sustainable. Do you have any single reason why those would be so impoverished or so encumbered?
Right.
And then my follow-up to that for your consideration would be, would you consider writing down some of these older loans that are at extremely high rates? A lot of times the pat answer that I hear in the field is, well, they just need to raise their damn rates, raise their rates, pay your bills. Well, I don't think that's true, and I don't think it's appropriate. I think a lot of the very small utilities that are holding 40-year mortgages on their utility, they got those loans 20 years ago, and they're at 5.75%, and their customer base and service area has actually shrunk over that period of time for so many reasons: loss of jobs, loss of industry and commerce. And so would you consider writing those loans down as part of your agenda to try to help them become sustainable? So did that make any sense?
Makes perfect sense that you'd ask that question. And I'm glad you asked it, because I don't want to leave you the impression that we have 7% of our portfolio that's not sustainable. The key piece of information is, in order to pass our test where we can say, yes, you've met your financial ratios, is the audit information that's submitted by the applicant has to be put into our system. What we do know is we have some field staff who were busy on other things and didn't get all those audits into the system. And so we know we don't have all of the data in. A few years back, when OMB had set a goal for us of 90% for that sustainability number, and we were down well in the 60s or something, because we just couldn't get the data in the system. So we've been systematically working to get those audits in. So we believe that that margin is actually much tighter. Based on what we see and based on our low delinquency rate, we actually believe we're somewhere up around 98%. I personally can't use that number because until I see it, right? And so our goal this year is to get every audit into the system so that we can substantiate that. That is, so I don't want you to take away that somehow the portfolio is at a higher risk. Clearly, our delinquency rate is less than 0.5%, so we have people paying us back. On your other question, we do have communities who are struggling, and they would like us to refinance and write down those loans. We don't have a authority to internally refinance our own debt. In cases where there are severe circumstances, we have on some occasions written down small portions of loans, reamortized, lowered interest rates. It happens in a small percentage of cases. But we do try to work with communities as much as we can to keep those rates affordable. And there are other options. If a community is sitting on an older loan that's got a higher interest rate and they have an opportunity to refinance that with another lender, we're not going to stand in their way. And we would look at that as well and work with that lender.
Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome. Uh-oh.
If I could, a question and a comment first.
Okay.
The question, and I've spoken briefly with you about this, is about the continuing resolution that we're under. Mm-hmm. And the reassurance that you're giving us that there is money for both loans and grants under the CR. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that I understand that, because I do have a project coming up. The other thing that you've heard from us in South Carolina about is we've gone through some severe staffing cuts because of retirements. I just want to say I'm most appreciative of what you're doing even though you stole Kent from me in South Carolina.
Well, technically from
But-
Kansas.
Well, technically. But let's go back to the home roots.
Okay.
But just thank you for what you're doing and looking at that. We now have a state engineer in South Carolina again.
You do.
And so it's starting to come back home to us, and it's speeding up the process as we go through this. But most of all, I want to say thank you personally to you. I'm well aware of what you've done for us and the rural water associations throughout our nation, as well as our states. And for those of you who do not know what Ms. Ponte does for us, it's unbelievable behind the scenes in ensuring that these programs go on for loans and grants for our states, but also for our rural water associations. And so hats off to you, Jackie, and heartfelt thanks to what you do for each one of us.
Thank you so much. And thanks to my great team. We're going to wrap up on a high note, Bill.
Out there.
Can't touch that one. Does anybody have anything else? Well, please give a warm thanks for these folks, our friends here.